Very good evening to you. Welcome to Friday Conversations with the King's Church. I'm Clive and
I'm Fiona.
We're husband and wife, part of the leadership of the King's Church. This evening we're going to be looking at the account of Jesus praying in Gethsemane. This will be the last in our series leading up to Easter. We've taken some of the incidents from Holy Week, which often we don't have time within that week to explore. We've done 3 or 4, and this is the last in the series. But before we go any further, this will be the last Friday conversation for a little while. After Easter, we're doing something different, and that will be announced in the notices that you'll see later, and we hope that you'll be able to engage with that. But as we come to the end of this series, I do want to thank all the people over the many months that we've sustained Friday Conversation. So I'm going to name them. So Jackie's contributed, and people appreciated her words. Sally has spoken quite a few times. Alan also has willingly shared, both being interviewed and in sharing in the scriptures. Matt and Verity, Jane has often been on camera. We've not persuaded her to come this side of the camera yet. And Keith, and obviously Fiona, and I'm often here.
And one or two visitors who came to be interviewed
we've
as
had,
well.
And if you're one of those visitors, we've really appreciated your contribution.
Yeah.
I wondered if we might have a little competition. Who was your favourite presenter? Or who was your best camera operator? I hope I could come top of the list there, but I'm not sure. I think many a goof happened on that occasion. And over the whole series, we've looked at the Lord's Prayer, discipleship, we've looked at the parables, and we've taken this series on Easter. So it is coming to a bit, not a halt, a breathing space.
Yes,
we're having a breathing space from Friday Conversation, and the next series that is going to involve teaching from Hugh Osgood, that will be over 7 weeks. So it'll be.
But that won't be live streamed.
It won't be live.
That'll be on Zoom,
different format.
And
yeah.
face to face. Yeah.
So coming to this evening's, we're looking. There's an account in Matthew and in Luke. John also makes reference to it, and obviously Mark. Fiona's going to read. You're going to read from Luke.
Yes, yeah. I'll read Luke's account.
Just a question I'd like to pose to you as we go through this evening. What for you are you learning about Jesus from this? It may not be something new that you're learning. What have you learnt about Jesus from this? So it's a very intimate account. So
yes.
Do you want to give the reference and the reading?
Yes, it's in Luke chapter 22. And I'm going to begin at verse 39, which is just after the Last Supper has finished, and they're now heading out from the upper room. So Luke 22, verse 39. And he came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. And when he came to the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter into temptation." And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and knelt down and prayed, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Rise and pray that you may not enter into temptation." While he was still speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" And when those who were around him saw what would follow, they said, "Lord, shall we strike with the sword?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. but this is your hour and the power of darkness.
So we're going to take some time going through that. We will pause in the middle for a song and for some notices, but we do value your comments, thoughts, observations, comments on our comments. Before that, I'm just going to do a geography lesson. Often in Bibles, they print a series of maps at the back. People often don't take a notice of it, but I think it's quite important to refer to maps. Just in the Old Testament, New Testament, you get the sense of movement, where things are located. Certainly the journey of Jesus. And in the version of the Bible I've got, they've printed, they've called it Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. Obviously, precise locations are a bit... well, they're not precise. But I just wanted to point out that the Mount of Olives, it's to the east of Jerusalem. It's to the east of Jerusalem. Jerusalem's here, and it says in the scriptures that after meeting in the upper room, they crossed the Kidron Valley, which is here, and then went up to the Mount of Olives. Okay, am I high enough? Yes? Yeah, yes. We're fine. Mm-hmm. Okay, went up to the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives was higher than the highest point in the city of Jerusalem. It's about 100 feet higher. And so you've got a panoramic view over Jerusalem. So Jesus is up the mountain there praying, and has the overview of Jerusalem, where he knows the events that are going to happen there. The Mount of Olives is mentioned in Zechariah, and Jesus would have known about this, that it says that on the day of the Lord, his feet will stand on the mount. Mm-hmm. So, which we understand about his second coming, when Jesus comes again, and it will be the place where Jesus appears over there. So it's a very significant place, and it says in the scriptures that they went as usual to this mount.
This particular garden of Gethsemane, Luke doesn't mention Gethsemane, but the others do.
Yes.
That was a place that he was obviously in the habit of visiting. Yes. And it's a sort of quiet, private place. Apparently, it means the oil press. So obviously, they pressed olives in that place.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Shall we keep up to date with the comments?
Yes. Maggie's put one in. Yes, Maggie's put in here. Jesus didn't want to go through the pain ahead, but was willing for God's will. This gives me permission to be totally honest with God about my feelings, but to know I have to submit my will to Him.
Yes. I want to refer back to a couple of weeks ago when Keith and Verity talked Matthew 24, 25. Some of the things Jesus was saying in the temple courts about the future. The disciples are saying, when will these things happen? And Jesus gives a whole catalogue of things. But one of the things that Keith and Verity were saying, that amidst all this turmoil, the wars, the famines, the earthquakes, signs, to be assured that God is in control. Yeah. So Jesus had said that to his disciples. When you see all this, don't be alarmed. It must happen, but there is a purpose, there is a destiny in that. Right. So I think fundamentally, Jesus is now facing his great trial, his the agony of this, and so what he had been saying to his disciples, there is someone in who's got a handle on this, knows what's happening. Yes. That's his own faith as well.
Yes. Well, he is actually living out what he's been preaching, which are when things are incredibly tough, and actually when things are really challenging, and from the human's perspective, you can't really understand how this can possibly be the right thing happening, and yet he here is totally trusting his Father to be in charge, to be the one who actually gives the clear path to follow, and he actually lives out what he's telling them to do. He's trusting God in the midst of all this.
Yes. Which gives sense to when Jesus says, I am the way. It's not that he's telling other people this is what you ought to do.
I'll tell you what to do, but he actually says, I am the way. He says, I'm walking it with you.
Yes.
Or you're to walk it with me.
Yes.
It's probably a more accurate way to put it. Given that it's his way, not ours.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I find it interesting that last week we were mentioning in John's Gospel the extended discourse and prayer that is recorded there in the upper room. So Jesus has been praying for the disciples, for himself, and now they leave that, cross the Kidron Valley, and he goes and prays. Yes.
And actually this is him pouring out his soul's agony here.
Yes.
This is the prayer battle to end all prayer battles, this one. You can see how incredibly intense it is. Well, I mean, Luke mentions this about his sweat being like drops of blood falling to the ground.
Yes.
And apparently this is something that can happen to human beings, but under incredible stress. It is a sign of really extreme physical stress when actually your sweat becomes blood, there's blood in it.
It's not a very nice picture, but I've seen people in the Olympic Games, these weightlifters who are taking incredible strain. Quite frequently they have a nosebleed.
Really?
Oh yeah, that's not quite, that's quite common. Just the pressure, the physical pressure, and blood pours from their nose. But here it's saying, when it's actually that your sweat is, this is a very extreme pressure that he's under. Yes. Let's go through. We're going to combine Matthew's account and Luke's, because there's an interweaving of different aspects to it.
Well, they all give you a little bit of a different detail that the others miss, don't they? That's always the thing.
Quite.
Yes, that's in Matthew 26.
Matthew 26,
Yes. Where are we now?
So one of the differences that Matthew identifies 3 disciples particularly that go further with Jesus. In Luke it says his disciples followed him, and then it's just referring to the disciples. But Matthew talks about Peter, James and John.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it says when Jesus went to Gethsemane, he said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And taking with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even unto death. Remain here and watch with me. And then going a little bit further, he prayed.
Yes.
So yes, he'd taken them all there to be there supporting him in prayer.
Well, I think that's important. Let's just talk about that.
Yes.
Because often the Gospels record that Jesus went up the mountain by himself and spent all night in prayer or something like this. But particularly this evening, he wants his disciples with him.
Yes. Well, and it's very sad, isn't it, that they keep falling asleep all the time and aren't there for him.
But doesn't it show the humanity of Jesus here? That he is the Son of God. He is divine, but he wants human companionship. He wants people to that he can recognise, you are with me in this.
Yes. Yes, that's right. And so he's sort of saying, couldn't you watch with me even for an hour? But also, I think it's as well as his longing for support and companionship there, it's also important that they see what happens, that there's, because obviously we're getting the eyewitness of what happened here, so they've actually seen what happens. They have seen the extreme agony that he's going through. They also see the arrival of Judas and the arrest, and of course they think they're out there ready for the new battle, don't they? Because they've all taken their swords with them, having misunderstood what he said.
Yes, because Luke 22:38, the disciples said, "See, Lord, here are 2 swords. That is enough," he replied. Some read that saying, "Well, we'll manage with 2." But he's saying, enough of that.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's because actually, as per usual, I think when we were looking at that some weeks ago, that when he's saying to them, "I'm going to be crucified and then on the 3rd day rise again," they all think he's talking in a metaphor and don't understand him.
Quite.
When he sort of tells them about, now you're going to be facing persecution, and so whereas before you could go out without bag or anything, and that, now you're going to have to take your purse with you and your sword if you've got it and all the rest of it, and they think, oh, he means that literally.
Yes.
So when he was talking in a metaphor, they got it the wrong way around. So yes, they've brought some swords with them, and we see they make use of them.
Yes. So Jesus is with the disciples, but also he's saying to them, pray that you will not fall into temptation.
Yes.
So he's coming to his own personal trial. But he's warned them before. No one is above their master. What they did to me, they'll do to you. And we know historically, from many of them, that did happen.
Yes.
And so, seeing how Jesus wins the battle, because at some point they too will face this battle.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, like in what we call the Lord's Prayer, which is really the disciples' prayer. But obviously, see, Jesus here is, again, he's carrying out what he's instructed them to do. When it says, "Do not lead us not into temptation," that can also be translated, "Do not bring us to the test."
That's right.
And actually, Jesus knows that now he is facing the ultimate. He's been fighting this battle with Satan all the way through, and consistently winning it. Now this is the ultimate test. When, in a sense, Satan pulls out all his stops.
Yes.
But he knows as well that his disciples will face this after him. So it's like he's again showing them the way to win that battle.
Yes.
And also I think he's making sure that, in that sense, he also protects them, because you notice I think it's John's account when they all turn up to arrest him and they say, he says, "Who are you looking for? Let these people go. I'm the one."
That is in John.
And that's because it says, I have lost none of those that you gave to me. So it's like he's still protecting them, because he knows that they're not ready for this test yet. And obviously, as the rest of the evening's events show, they all failed it. But later, when their time came, they would pass it.
Yes.
But they're not ready for it yet. Whereas, so yes, watching him go through this, I wonder for them, as they were facing persecution and death and martyrdom,
they would remember
whether they would remember this is how we approach this.
Well, can we take the way Jesus prayed then, and the sequence of his prayers, because 3 times he went to pray. He comes back and finds the disciples sleeping, but he went again and prayed. So in Luke verse 41, it says, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Matthew has so we need to refer to Matthew. Could you just read it? Could you read it in Matthew?
Going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will."
Yes, and then the next time he prays.
And he came to the disciples, found them sleeping.
Yes.
And he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak."
And then he would pray.
And then again for the second time he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done."
There's a slight change there. In the first one, if you're willing, take this.
Yes.
But then there's a recognition
Yeah.
That's not possible.
Well, basically, he's gone to the Father and asked,
yes.
please, can you take this cup from me?
Yes.
He's actually had an answer,
yes.
and the answer is no.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You've got to drink it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's what we get there. I mean, that's sort of all put into kind of one sentence,
yes.
because we don't hear what the Father says. But what we do gather is that he is at this point saying, if there is any other possible way,
mm-hmm.
you know, and obviously the devil's there putting all the doubts in. Well, you know, will it work? Are you deluded?
Yes.
If you are the Son of God, that
yes.
same thing that he had way back in the beginning, that yes, that's all kind of coming in, and then he doesn't want to go through with it. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
when he knows. I mean, he knows what happens to people who the Romans think would be messiahs, because he's seen them on crosses many times, and so he knows what's ahead of him, and he also knows that it's more than just the horrors of crucifixion.
We'll come to
it's
that
the whole weight of sin that he's facing, and so he has the natural reaction of saying, if possible, isn't there another way? And then the fact that he says, but nevertheless not my will but yours, means that God has actually said to him, no, I'm sorry, you have to do it.
Yeah. And then he says, okay, so I know this has got to happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, you know, if this cannot pass unless I drink it.
Yeah.
Your will be done. That's what I'm committed to.
Yes.
You know, whereas with his disciples, the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak, because they'd all been saying, oh, well, no, we'll never desert you.
Peter saying, if the rest go, I'm going to stick with you.
Yeah. And he knew that actually Peter genuinely...
that was his heart.
That was his heart, that was his desire, that was his what his spirit wanted. But he also, you know, Jesus knew better than Peter did how weak his flesh was.
Yeah.
You know, and that he wouldn't actually carry through what he wanted to do, which is different from Judas, because Judas didn't want to do it.
Yes. Yeah. That just to take a moment on this, the agony Jesus is suffering. I think again it's Matthew. I've got Luke open, but you've got Matthew open.
I've got both of them open.
Okay, you've got both of them. But there's a phrase, sorrowful unto death. You know, this is overwhelming me. One commentator in common language said, but it's not quite appropriate, but we get that this is killing me. You know, this is all-consuming.
Yes.
Yes.
Overwhelming.
Yes. Yeah.
Because nobody can actually kill Jesus.
No. That was just a colloquial phrase, but that's what it means. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, it's completely swamping me, isn't it?
Yes. But you were beginning to allude to it is the physical suffering, but this cup. Let's talk about this cup.
Yes.
Last week we talked about the cup of communion and the bread. If you haven't watched that, I know we were doing it, but it's very good. It's good understanding of the meaning of communion. Yeah. But here Jesus is saying that if you're willing, take this cup from me. But then he's saying, okay, I've got to drink it.
Yes.
But it's more than as awful as the horrors of the crucifixion are, it's more than that, isn't it?
Yes. See, this is the one, remember when James and John were wanting to get the places either side of him when he came in his glory?
Yes.
And he says, are you able to drink the cup I have to drink?
And they said,
oh, yes,
we can. We can.
Because they didn't understand what this cup involved.
Yeah.
And this is actually this is the cup of God's wrath he's going to drink. You know, in the Old Testament there's a lot of in the prophets, you know, the bit about being given the cup of God's wrath, which they want the nations to be given, but of course also at times that his own people have actually had to drink that cup because of their rebellion and their idolatry. This is a picture that's used to describe God's judgment and the outpouring of his wrath against sin, and that is what we know the world is heading for and is deserving, and here we see that Jesus is actually taking that and drinking it for us.
this is and I use the word rightly, the awful realization, because within the Old Testament there were the sin offerings, there were the scapegoats, there was a substitutionary sacrifice, and the whole picture of the suffering servant from Isaiah and other places, that he made him a sin offering. And Jesus has got that awareness that the whole penalty, the whole weight of sin will be placed on him.
Yes.
Which is something he's never, ever experienced.
No, because that will bring a separation from his Father.
Which he's never known.
No, he is the one and only human being who has never known what it is to have a separation from God.
No. It's all, I and the Father are one. That's what he said. I only do what the Father tells me. There's a union, there's a oneness
That's
there.
right, and a perfect harmony between them at all times. And actually he knows that what he's actually going to take is the whole penalty of what it means to have rebelled against God, and on our behalf to be forsaken by God.
Why have you forsaken me? As he cries on the cross. Yes. Yeah. And so you've got the twin elements, which is the physical crucifixion, but what is happening while he is being crucified. The hymn we sing, there was no other good enough to pay the price of sin. And that's what's happening there. Yes.
Well, and I sort of think of it when you realise that it's the entire weight of all the sin of the world that ever was and ever will be.
Yes.
And he's taking it all at once. Now I think, it's like if you see something, in the newsreel, or you read it in a book or whatever that is absolutely awful.
Well, at the moment we've got these awful reports from Ukraine, and
and you see the horror of
that,
of something. And I find there are some things, I can't watch, I can't read, because that that is just one little aspect of it. I mean, sometimes a really horrible and huge one.
I know friends of mine, quite a number of people have visited the concentration camps from Nazi Germany. I just couldn't go there. I emotionally, I couldn't cope with that.
There are some things where you sort of think, I can't even bear to think about it, to look at it.
No.
And that's just that aspect. And to think of for somebody who's utterly pure and therefore not infected with any of this to any degree, to then actually take the whole lot on yourself.
Yes.
It just, I can't even imagine what that was like for Jesus, except that when we see this sweat full of blood dropping, it tells you what an incredibly hard battle he's having.
Yes. This is the watershed moment. This is where the battle is won.
Yes.
This is the victory is gained on the cross and the resurrection, but this is the battleground.
Yes, basically, the devil is defeated through the cross.
Yes.
But this is where Jesus wins the battle, because he still does not yield to the temptation, and being put to the point where Satan has actually got his entire arsenal out when it comes to the temptation here. It's not sort of. I mean, you and I know what temptation's like, but we always fall long before he has to get out the nuclear weapon. If he can knock you down with a pea shooter, he's not going to get out his nuclear weapons, is he? But for Jesus, he has been trying everything all the way through, ever since he discovered that this is the one.
Well,
he's been trying.
People have tried to kill him previously.
But more than that, he's been trying to get Jesus to choose a way other than the Father's, to do something other than the Father's will. That's what the battle has been. And here, facing what he's facing, well, you can imagine, Satan is absolutely throwing everything he's got at him, and Jesus is still saying, not my will, but yours.
There's a lovely verse in Hebrews which says, a body you've prepared for me, talking about Jesus, the incarnation, but here I am, I've come to do your will, O God. And his life on earth was dedicated to fulfilling the Father's will. And therefore, when he cries on the cross, it is finished, that is a cry of triumph, that I've done everything you asked me to do. I've been obedient even unto death. Yes.
And actually, in Hebrews 12 is the other bit that came to my mind, you know, consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And we're not talking primarily there about the cross, although obviously, you know, that is a shedding. It's here in the Garden of Gethsemane, where the battle with Satan has been so strong, the battle and the temptation to choose a slightly easier way. You know, and he won that battle.
We're going to pause, still give my voice a rest. We're going to listen to some of the notices and what will be happening after Easter with our study groups and a song, and then we'll pick up again, continue the account. Okay, we'll go to the notices and the song. Thank you, Jane, for that song. I'm saying as it was going through, it's not necessarily have favourites, but it's one that we really appreciate. I think the words and the melody are so good on that. That's really good. So a couple of comments, particularly from Verity, but Maggie's also responded on that. Verity asked, very good question, so was Jesus taking on board sin at that point in the garden, or was he just aware of what he was to face? That's an interesting one. I remember years ago when I was in college, we did we wrote and produced a play, and in it we took some of the gospel stories, and particularly the one I remember is the woman caught in the act of adultery that was brought to Jesus, and he writes in the sand, and one of the things we were saying, that all the anger that was directed against this woman, Jesus, by his action, gets it transferred to himself. So throughout his ministry, Jesus was taking on the consequences of sin committed by other people or committed to other people all through his life. He was carrying sin, facing the consequences of it. But obviously, when it comes to the cross, then he pays the price for sin. So I think you're right, Verity, that he's now aware of what the impact, the enormity of that will be. But it isn't until there's a biblical principle very clearly outlined in the Old Testament: without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. And it's the miracle of the cross that it is effective backwards
as well as forwards.
So all the forgiveness that God has given, it all comes to the cross. So which is quite a study in itself. But yes, the price is paid on the cross.
That's
and
right.
all the sacrificial animals in the past, that's what they were prefiguring this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but she's put another comment in there.
Another comment? Yes. My goodness me. Yeah. Okay, you can answer this one. Excuse me. I read that the priest's job was to teach, pray, and offer sacrifice, and that is what. Is it a question? And that is what Jesus is doing here as the great high priest.
Yes, and then Maggie has put in as well, and Jesus was himself the sacrifice.
Yes.
Yeah, so
which is what Hebrews says.
That's right.
The teaching in the book of Hebrews.
Yes. That's right. So you see him actually. This is him preparing to actually do all that.
Yes.
And of course, fighting the battle with the temptation to not do it, to take an easier way. Because of course he did have the option of saying no. this is the big risk of all.
There's
he is not forced to go through it, and I think it's really important we understand that Jesus was not killed on the cross.
No, he
laid down his life on the cross, and he actually decided when he knew that the job was finished, then he said, "Father, to your hands I commit my spirit," and he. At that point, chose to die.
He gave up his spirit.
Yes, and what he'd said says in John's Gospel, I lay down my life. Nobody takes it from me. I lay it down. And so, yes, dying was a choice for him, which it isn't for anybody else.
No. There's I don't know where it's come from, but there's a phrase: nobody can steal from you what you've given.
No. But,
if you gave it, they can't steal it.
No.
And that's true with Jesus. He gave his life.
Yes.
But in that struggle of, I know the Father's will, and I'm going to embrace it. I've got this lovely picture of verse 43 in Luke. It says, an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him.
Yes.
Didn't say, well, here's the back door. You can, I'll show you an escape route.
That's right.
I'll strengthen you to go through.
This is the difference between the fallen angel, who is actually sort of tempting you to sort of disagree with God and take up your own method of whatever you want to do. But the angel from heaven, who is sent by God, strengthens you to do what God wants you to do.
And I'm just going to dip my toe into a very controversial area, but there is some body of Christian teaching which says that in all the calamities that will come, Christians won't have to go through it. Our experience is that God often does take us through very testing and difficult and calamitous. We're not immune from the tragedies of the world, but rather than taking us out of it, he enables us through it.
And actually uses us as part of the process of bringing about the kingdom of God. Yes, that's.
But angels are mentioned later on as well, aren't they?
Well, yes. What you mean? The angels that appear to show them the empty tomb and to.
Well, no. What Jesus, what you were saying earlier.
Earlier on, he's mentioned.
She's remembered.
Yes. Yes, that's right. In Matthew's account. When they come to actually arrest him just after all this, and it's John that tells us it was Peter who actually struck off Malchus's ear. Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword." In other words, I am not bringing in a kingdom like this world's kingdoms, and it doesn't come by those means. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled that it must be so? And I think in is it in Luke, one of the others says, shall I not drink the cup that my Father has given me? That's one of the things, that he's saying, no, the victory is going to be won by submission, by obedience, by sacrifice. All the things that in this world make you the underdog and the victim. But actually this victim is going to be the conqueror. And Satan does not understand the methods. And that's why you were trying to think of where the verse was, and we couldn't think of the chapter.
I wish I knew my Bible a bit better.
But where Paul
phrases come to mind, I think, where is that?
But where Paul says, none of the rulers of this world understood this.
She knows her Bible well.
If they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory, because they would have realised that they were actually bringing in their own destruction. They did not understand it. And human beings do not understand it, because, we're all sort of programmed to think like the devil does, that it's survival of the fittest. It's the strong ones get to the top, and so you must make sure you never get to be the underdog and all the rest of it. Actually, that's not how the kingdom of God comes in, and it's not what brings the ultimate victory. That actually just brings ultimate destruction. What he says here, when Peter gets the sword out, all who take the sword will perish by the sword. In other words, you try those methods, you just bring more violence. It's like the dilemma with the situation in Ukraine. NATO could have sent in nuclear weapons, but then that triggers World War III, because it just escalates, doesn't it? It's always a dilemma.
On the same theme, just pick up a comment from Maggie there. So many Christians are being tortured and killed these days because of their faith in Jesus. And Romans 8 and verse 17 says, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. If indeed, now this isn't a mandatory command for every Christian, but it says, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. And the Bible talks of the world not being worthy of such people, and those who are tortured or killed for their faith, people are dismissing them, but there is a crown of righteousness laid up. And very significantly in these days, the special recognition for those who've been beheaded for their faith, which is quite...
nowadays, that's quite significant, isn't it?
Quite significant these days, yes. Yeah. Go on, yes.
Well, this might be switching slightly to a slightly different angle, because Verity's introduced the other thing, let's say.
Yes.
This passage is beautiful in the way it shows Jesus' humanity. I feel so much closer to him knowing that he has faced fear in an even more extreme way than I have. He knows and understands us so intimately. I know that I can trust him. And Maddie's saying, she feels that too. This is one. I mean, it must have been so strange for the disciples, because up till now, whatever's been happening, Jesus has always been in control.
Storm of the sea.
Jesus was not phased.
5,000 people to be fed.
Yes, people trying to throw him over a cliff, people wanting to stone him, people threatening him, crowds. Jesus has always been so in control and so very obviously a figure of authority, even in even in what other people would have found difficult circumstances. Now suddenly they see him in his weakness and frailty and humanity. It must be really sort of scary actually for them to suddenly see Jesus overwhelmed like this and in such agony. It'd be like for a small child suddenly seeing his father in this state, when dad is always the strong one who can sort the problems, and then you suddenly find that here he is. You can imagine why they were so sorrowful, why they were so scared, why they were just so overwhelmed by it all. Because they don't understand what's going on. In fact, nobody understood what was going on really, except Jesus himself. I mean, with hindsight, we get some insight into it, but the disciples didn't have hindsight. And so, for them, this must have been very, very frightening.
Going back to what I was referring to with Keith and Verity a couple of weeks ago, in that description of the world in chaos, really. And I think Keith was saying, you might be saying, what on earth is happening? Where is God in all this? Because it's just absolutely, everything seems out of control. But for Jesus, having made that decision, he is now his dignity, his poise, his he doesn't offer any defence when he's on trial. Here it says, because in the garden he says, "Am I leading a rebellion that you come every day with that you've come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me." But there's no resistance to that arrest. There's, as a sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. So he makes no defence. In fact, he seals his own fate when on oath they say, "Are you the Christ?" And he said, "Yes, I am." That was it. His fate was sealed. But he was in charge of the whole process.
Well, basically, he knows his Father is in charge and it's his plan, and Jesus is in total control of himself.
Yes.
In that, he is choosing
Yes.
to obey his Father and to trust his Father and to do what his Father says, even though it's going to be so unbelievably costly. And that same principle, you know, for the disciples, when their times of testing come, which they will, you know, be facing to, that's the same principle, isn't it? that you're trusting that God is in charge, and you are obeying him, even when that is at incredible personal cost.
Yes.
You know.
There's that phrase when he's on trial and they bring Jesus out, and that famous phrase, "Behold the man." And I've always thought, actually, what a statement. This is the man.
Yeah.
This is man as he.
This is what man was meant to be.
In a fallen world, but this is the embodiment of the kingdom. Yes. Yes. I think we're coming to the end. My voice is coming to the end. We have a stand-in. If my voice totally failed, Verity was very kindly going to step in, but I think we're just about to make it.
Well, she's put another comment
in
here as
Verity,
well.
You're keeping me going. I'm trying to finish.
This helps me to know that I can face my fears because he has first.
Yes.
And that's the thing, when you see the extremes he went to, we're back to Hebrews again, when we have a high priest who has been tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin, and actually he knows far more about the pressure of temptation than we do, because, you know, basically all of us have at some point fallen long before it got to the extent to which Jesus experienced it. But the fact that he has faced all his fears, he has faced everything, and he is still obeying, it means that whatever I'm facing, which obviously is in nothing like the same, you know.
No.
We sometimes compare our trivial problems as if this is somehow my cross.
The car broke down, you know, and I was
when it's
stranded
actually just trivial stuff. Never mind
stuff of life.
But even, you know, when you are in the real serious stuff, you know, which is serious persecution and trial and all the rest of it, that actually whatever we face, he's been there, and he knows what it's like. And he is able, therefore, to help us and to strengthen us in our time of need. And just as, you know, here while he's here, you know, the angels of heaven are actually there helping him to do God's will. And God always provides us with the resources we need to do his will if we want to.
Yes.
That's the crunch bit. Because the crunch thing is our will. So every time I've fallen to temptation, I have to admit that was because on that occasion I decided I'll do my will, not yours. And I can't make it an excuse and say that I couldn't help it, and, you know, that it was all, you know, well, I mean, I know God understands, I know God is merciful and forgiving, but I need to accept that I sinned, and therefore I need to repent of sin and not make excuses. And the fact is that whatever I do face, and this is the one thing that comforts me, because sometimes you think, I wouldn't be able to pass this test if it came to me. And, you know, for me, ever since I was a child and I first heard about people being burnt at the stake and all this sort of thing, it was my terror. I thought, I wouldn't have the courage to do it, but I wouldn't want to find myself not on God's side, you know, and it was a real problem for me as a rather intense child. But actually, what it does tell us is that whatever we do actually face, when we're facing it, he will supply the grace to do it.
My grace is sufficient.
As long as our will is to do his will.
Yes.
If we thought we could sort of get him on board to do our will, then we may find that we don't stand. But if we really want to do his will, he enables us to do it. And this is what Jesus here really is. This is such a... Because I shall never have to face what he faced.
No. Well, we are going to draw to a conclusion. Let's just do a few more comments here. People agreeing with what Verity said about being able to face our fears. Quoting Psalm 91, I will not fear the terror of the night nor the arrow that flies by day. And then some very kind comments of appreciation. And Maggie saying to everyone, for all the Friday conversations. We look forward to further conversations in the future. Watch this space. Right. Verity's keeping us going.
Perhaps she should have come and relieved you afterwards.
I'm going to use hand signs in a minute. You better read it.
Okay then. For me, the hardest battle is always before I do the thing I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
And that being reflected here is very comforting.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
So we're meeting on Sunday. It's Palm Sunday. Whatever church fellowship you go to, but we're looking at the events of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, and then obviously the following week is Easter Sunday, which this country makes a big fuss of Christmas Day, but as Christians we ought to make a big fuss of Easter.
Yes, this is the big one.
This is the big one. So I hope you can find some place to go and join in Christian fellowship on Easter Day.
Yes,
we meet
the resurrection.
Yes, we meet in the Queen Mary Centre, 10 o'clock Sunday mornings. Be very welcome to join. But thank you for this evening. Thank you to Verity. Thank you again to everybody who's contributed to these series of Friday conversations.
Yeah.
I'm going. Do you want to say good night?
And good night.
Good night. Good night.